honestly, I just want to get a little vulnerable, just because I like that. I like when I think it's just like a way to be authentic, and I like listening to people who are authentic and don't really have a filter and don't care what people are gonna think or care what they think. Um, I figured I would talk about just like something that I think most people actually deal with more than you'd think or expect they do. But like I don't want to say like being raised or whatever, because that's not the right word. But like being raised in an environment that kind of sucked, and I don't. I want to do this story justice because I'm not the only person that was like affected or has, it's not just my side of the story. There's other people that were involved, people that I care about and love, and I don't want them to see this and have the wrong impression, or to feel like I'm not telling the full truth, or to, or that's not how they experienced it. I'm just telling my side of the story, or how I experienced it, really. Um, but yeah, ever I wasn't really aware of all of my biological father's debauchery, I guess, or activity. But it's kind of hard not to be. I think it's just like being a child and being naive and not understanding like how things actually work, and just hoping it's not the thing. Like you kind of like tell your brain that it's not the case. You tell your brain that like, oh, it's not that bad, or it's like whatever, because that's the only. I think a lot of people don't understand that, like, when you go through, especially childhood, like when you're young, you go through just, that's your childhood. That's all you know. That's the environment you were raised in. That's all you understand. And most people think that it's normal because it's their normal. It's what they've experienced. It's what you've experienced. But like some people don't actually go through that, and it's like as you age and get older, as I was like getting older and like seeing it, like everybody else's life around me was not as chaotic, and it's kind of easy to tell like who was raised in just like, I don't want to call it hell, but just in like a different environment, like just raised in just not a normal atmosphere. Like it, most kids would like have both parents and have, I don't want to say an easy time, but like just a less stressful time. And I think you could tell like who, like I think a lot of teachers are kind of jerks too, because like you go through school and you're like, oh, that kid's acting out. Like, because I loved to act out. I was a garbage kid. Like I was mean, but like it wasn't just because like I was a dickhead, which I was, but it was actually because you don't want to do schoolwork shit. You don't want to do like life. Every other like life is way better outside of your home, I guess. But like it's also like, I don't want to say a cry for help, but like everything was easier than being home, and like it was so much easier to just act out. And I don't think it was a cry for help. I really don't. I think it was just because like me acting out was like below average of like what other people and my adults were doing around me. Like, I don't know, not to compare myself to other kids, because I'm sure some people have had it way worse than me. But in my small towny school, I definitely think I had one of the worst stories, I guess, one of the worst environments. And I feel like I'm trying to dance around it because I don't really like going into detail about it, but that's just, I don't know. If I'm going to talk about it, I think I have to go into detail. I was raised by a decent mother, honestly. I have no complaints about my childhood. I don't want this to be like a sob story. I just think it's kind of interesting. I think if there's other kids who are younger than me or they're the same, I don't care, whatever. But if you hear this and you're like, oh, that's what I'm going through, or like blah 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 blah, I can relate to that, then that's what I want. Like I want somebody to be like, oh, I wish I had somebody to be like, dude, it doesn't matter, whatever, just have fun and quit worrying about it, which is kind of the mindset that I got out of it. But I was raised by a really awesome mom, which is probably the reason why I'm not too effed up, is because you have some kind of backbone, some kind of structure, some kind of like responsibility. She was a nurse, and she worked her ass off for me and my brothers, my two other older brothers. So I was the youngest. But I will say I don't fault her for it, but she definitely picked not the greatest guy to settle down with and have a life with. And I honestly don't know, because I can't really... I ask her all the time, and I don't know if she's being truthful. Like, I think she's just a bit of a liar, just all the time. Like, when I ask her if my father was always kind of just a piece of shit, and she always would say no, which I don't know if I believe her or not. I think she knew that he was into stuff before she even married him, before she dated him, I think she knew, but thought that he would change or that she was going to fix him, or I really don't know. I think a lot of women choose dudes that they shouldn't choose, They choose the excitement over, I guess the backbone, somebody with a backbone. They choose, the craziness, the drama, more than they want to just choose. I won't say the easy path, because it's not it. I guess it is the easy path. It's just the less work. That's really what it is. It's just less work. I think she didn't understand how important her decision was going to be, how much it would affect her and all her kids, but it did. Like, I do think that that's probably one of the most important things, especially if you're going to have kids. Like, who you pick as your significant other is going to have a absolutely humongous turnout of like whether or not your life is going to be enjoyable or just stressful and painful. But yeah, I can't tell you exactly when. Like, I was like, oh wow, my dad's like a drug dealer, or just doing meth, or just like he was always weird, man. I always knew it too. Like, he was like, I guess when you grow up, you like it's subtly like a little bit more and more, like every time you get slightly smarter and more like self-aware and just aware of your situation and everything around you, you start to go like, oh, that's weird. Oh, that's a little weird. Oh, that's a little weird. And then it just continues to pile up until you're just like, what the hell? Like, what is this? Like, who are these people? Why are you just, why are there always drugs around? Like, I don't know. It's just, after a while, you kind of just go, oh, this is it, whatever. My dad's a drug dealer. And it didn't really bother me. It just made me more angry. And I don't hate the guy. I really don't hate him. He's still alive today. I don't talk to him. I don't care to either. I don't resent him in any way. I just don't. My life is just so much easier and better without having him in it. Yeah, and everything... I can't say whether or not I would be like... I definitely would be a different person, but I can't say I'd be better off if he wasn't a drug dealer. But probably would be. Some of like the first... Like, one of my first memories that's like solidified or just like concreted in my brain is like when they were just like DEA agents just flooding my house. I remember coming home from school, and it wasn't like too crazy to come home from school and my dad not be there to pick us up from like the school bus, because we had to walk home or whatever, like 2 miles. And I live in the Northeast, so it's kind of cold, and like sometimes it'd be snowing. This day was in the summer, so it was actually pretty decently hot. So we ended up like walking, me and my brother, my older brother, walking home from the bus stop, which it wasn't weird, Most of the times he would just forget that he had kids, I think. But I don't think he forgot this day. I think it was obvious. Well, I know it was because when we walked home, we walked over on the hill and just saw just police and SWAT cars and like FBI, DA, like, I mean, I just remember, like, the three letters on everybody's back, like, it was just, like, what the, everybody with their, their yellow or white letters on their back, and we walked up, and people were like, what do you, like, I don't even remember the words transacted, I just remember sitting on my porch or patio of the house, and, my mom was unaware, because she was at work, so my dad would have to usually pick us up from the school bus. Didn't pick us up that day, and me and my brother were just sitting on our porch with these like FBI. I can't remember if they're FBI or DEA, or a little bit of both. I think it was a little bit of both, but like one of the guys was just sitting there talking on the phone, and I remember our 3-car garage or whatever. My dad was just he was handcuffed, being pulled out of the garage, and he wasn't like fighting or resisting or anything like that, but there were just like so many police officers, just so many cops everywhere for one guy, and I just thought it was so funny or interesting, or just like, not at the time, I don't think it was funny at the time. At the time I was just like, what is going on? But it was one of the first times he got arrested, and I was there to see it. And it was just kind of like one of those, I was super young, I can't even remember how young I was, but I just remember thinking like how crazy it was. Like that's when I first realized how like nuts it was to have a father that was just constantly into bad shit. Because I was like, this is definitely not normal. Like I definitely knew that most kids, anyone wouldn't see that in their lifetime, just seeing their dad get arrested in front of them and just have like so many cop cars. And I remember it being like one of those SWAT vans, like I won't call it a SWAT van, but like one of those huge buses that was like all blacked out, and like, and he got put in the back of one of those, and it was like a huge one, like, and I didn't even think those were real. I guess now I know that they were real once seeing it, but it's like one of those that you'd see in the movies. One of like, I guess, The Dark Knight, when Harvey, whatever his name is, Two-Face, gets put in the back of one of them. It was like one of those. You remember getting put in the back of one of those. And drove off and went to prison for, God, a couple months, honestly. I just remember it being like, whatever. And I remember getting out earlier and being like, that's weird, And he just went back and to normal, came back to our house and everything. And it's kind of funny, like, I think at that time my mom got a divorce when he went to jail for the first time. But then kind of was just like, yeah, whatever, you can come back into our lives, which was another one of her colossal failures, just like doing that, just letting him come back into our lives. And I remember like, as I got older and my brothers like moved out of the house and went on their way, like I think I got the worst of it, because I got to see like the major downfall like firsthand, and was old enough to like know what was going on and experiencing it, versus them being like so distant from it and not seeing it. Luckier, I think, for sure. We all, I can't speak for them, but I know we all, I'll say, dislike him. I don't think any of us hate him. We kind of laugh at it now. It's hilarious to us now. It's funny. Like, to be raised by a meth head, the first thing, he wasn't a meth head at the time of telling that story. He got arrested for distributing marijuana. I don't even know what the correct terminology is for it, but like, just distributing. And I'm pretty sure, I found out later, when he talked about it, because it wasn't like when he came back into my life, I would, talk to him as little as I possibly could, but I was not, it's one of those things it's hard to not be intrigued by him, because it is just so nuts, it's chaotic, his life is so just not normal. Most people don't live a life that he lived. And I remember him telling us that he was set up, basically. Like one of his buddies, I can't remember one of his buddies from either high school or, karate, who knows, like whatever it was, forget that he knew this kind of guy a while, like years, right? And he set him up basically for that sting operation. So he got set up and arrested for, selling him marijuana, and then went to jail for it. And I think the guy was in trouble, so he became an FBI informant, which they love to do that. They like turn people who get arrested into rats to bring down other people, and then those people that they bring down, like my dad, they'll try to flip them and turn them into rats to basically set up other to take other people off the streets from dealing drugs or whatever it is. So they would like get the sting operation, arrest my dad, bring him in, and then be like, hey, you're gonna either spend 20 years in prison, or you could rat on people that you know to get a lesser sentence. And most of the time, people will pick the lesser sentence, and they'll set up people, their friends or whoever they are that they know that have drugs and things like that, and they could put them in prison so that they can, and it's just a chain of people ratting on each other until the last person just doesn't have anyone to rat on, or has morals or something like, I'll say morals, doesn't want to rat anyone else out. They'll just take the largest amount of prison time possible, which is just sucks, I guess. So moral of the story, don't be afraid to rat for the sake of other people, because most of the time they're just going to end up ratting on you. Yeah. And, it was interesting, because at that point, you would think that he would learn that, like, you can't trust people. You can't trust, and I think that's probably where I learned, like, I'm just skeptical of anybody and everybody, and scared of telling anyone anything that I think that they can, like, wreck my life with, or just not even, I just won't even honestly talk to most people because I just don't trust them. Like, you definitely have to earn my trust, and even then, I don't think I'll ever trust you. And I think just from watching, one of the closest people in my life not be able to trust anyone in their circle, but also I can't trust my own biological father. So why would I trust anybody who, the only people that I could genuinely trust are the people that went through that with me, and they're just my brothers, honestly. Because they were aware of it as I was, they... But yeah, like I was saying, I just became skeptical of most people, because it's like one of those things where, I think that's why most people are skeptical of anyone. It's like somebody close to you who shouldn't be, typically shouldn't be an untrustworthy person, is an untrustworthy person in that person's life, and then they just can't really trust anybody after that. Like, I can't just, like, be like, oh yeah, instantly think everybody's good. I have no... I developed a gauge, I developed a gauge, like, whether or not to really tell if somebody's a good person, like a genuine person, just because when you're raised by people that just, like, lie all the time, you can usually learn when somebody's lying pretty easily. And it's like, you always had to, like, read between the lines and find the motivation of, like, why somebody's saying something to you. Because most of the time you have a conversation with a drug addict, what they say isn't really what they mean. Like, they could say, oh, like, I'm going to stop, or I don't want to do this, or, it's not my fault, or whatever excuse that they give. It's almost always just to, like, appease you, like, to make you feel, like, at ease. Like, oh, it's not a problem, I'm figuring it out. They love to find Jesus, at least my father did. He liked to pretend that, like, he, like, was forgiven by God, or this and that, to like, I don't know, to seem like a better person out of it, to be like, oh, like, I'm not doing the drugs anymore, but like every time he would, and it's the funniest thing because like every time he would be like, I'm done, like I'm not doing drugs, I'm not selling drugs anymore. I swear to God, he would just get like arrested the next like time. He would, and it would always be like worse. He'd always just get arrested for something dumber or like inexcusable. I can't remember honestly how many times it has been since he's been arrested. Like how many times in my life he's been arrested. It's definitely at least 3, maybe more than that. And they're all drug charges, which is kind of nuts to me. It's just like, dude, like you just don't learn your lesson ever. And the last one was the funniest because it's like the exact same thing happened with the first one, with the last one. Because the weirdest thing, like when this was all going on, is like you become like aware of certain like weird things that are going on in your life, like, and you're like, that's just not normal. Like I remember driving everywhere, like whether it was like I was going to college, like school, just class. I think it was like in between, like, but like I was saying, like things in your life were just weird. Like I became so aware of like weird things that most people would never become aware of. Like when I was in high school and like in between high school and college, when I would drive to school and drive to college, I was like, I could have sworn, like I was like, people are following me everywhere I go. Like it's always like certain cars or like certain things, like certain times, like I would just be getting followed, like tailed everywhere for months. And I remember telling my brothers and my mom, like I'm being followed. Like I know, like people are legitimately following me. Like, and I don't know why. Like I was like, people are like, it's always these certain cars at these certain times, and I was like, is anybody else being followed? Like, and everybody was telling me I was crazy. Like, dude, like you're being like schizophrenic, or you're being crazy, you're being, like people aren't following you, like your life's not that. Like, I remember them being like skeptical of me telling them that I was being followed, and then later it came out, like when my dad went missing for 3 days. I remember finding out, reading an article when he was in jail, that there was like a 3-month or like it was like an insane amount of time of an investigation on him. So he was being tailed, I was being tailed, I bet you everybody else was being tailed, but they didn't know it. And it was by DEA agents just following me around, probably wanting to see if like I was dealing drugs for him, or like how, like how his operation was working. And after that, I remember my family being like, well, you were definitely right. People were definitely following you. And I could just tell, like, it was super strange. Like, I also, like, weird people would stop by, and it wasn't abnormal, too, for weirdos, like, sketchy people to stop by the house. But I remember, like, after he got arrested, I remember, like, I think he just became an informant or whatever for the FBI or the DEA, whichever one it was, I forget. Or both, I don't know. But I remember people like stopping by, like looking for him, and I was like, and I couldn't tell if it was like, because sometimes they were clean cut and sometimes they weren't, and it's hard to tell sometimes like who a drug user is versus who isn't, based on like how long they've been doing a drug or what drug. It's super easy to tell a meth head who's gone down the road of meth for a really long time, but it's kind of hard to tell a meth head when they're not doing meth and they've only started doing it a few times. Like a pothead, same deal. Like potheads are kind of impossible to tell whether or not they do, pot. Sometimes it's clean cut people, but most of the times you can tell who's a pothead and a shitty person based off of like how easy it is to tell if they're a pothead. But yeah, sometimes it's not too easy to tell who a druggie is and isn't. But I definitely think I have a better gauge than most people, just being surrounded by them all the time. I remember, and this is just a warning to everybody, like, don't don't do drugs and hang around people who do drugs. That's like I have no remorse or like, and you'd think that I would because I was like raised by a person who was super addicted to anything and abusive in any drug category and mental, just like manipulative. You would think that I would be like lackadaisical on people who are drug users, but like when I see people who are homeless and drug addicts, and I have zero remorse for them because I lived with one, and I lived with one that I probably should have remorse for, and I gave him a million chances. We all gave him a million chances, and every person that you see on the street who was cracked out of their mind, and the reason that they're there is because their family would no longer enable them to be doing the things that they were doing, so they had to go on the street to do it. Like that's the reason. Like you see these people and you're like, oh, they're so down on their luck. They're so no, they're choosing to be there because people had enough of their BS. Like people just don't want to deal with them doing drugs around them and them bringing people around them, and they just like are like, I can't deal with you anymore. Like get out of my life. So that's why, like every time you give money to somebody on the street, like I want you to think about it and be like, well, did this person mess up a whole family? Did this person home wreck and break a family apart because of their drug habits, their addictions, their gamble, whatever it may be? Most of the time, you just don't know. Like, I doubt that a person on the street that looks like they're living on the street is a good person because of that. Like, they essentially did it to themselves. And I know every case is different most of the time. I'm generalizing. Most of the time you see somebody who's a drug addict, it's in their own doing. Like it's not, it's a rarity if they're like, oh man, like it's just a rarity if they shouldn't be there. It's such a rarity. Most of the time if they don't want to be there, they won't. They'll figure it out. But a lot of them just don't have the willpower. They don't want to change, They don't want to change for their loved ones. They don't want to change for their family. They don't want to change for themselves. They'd rather get high. They'd rather be into that kind of shit than not, It's that easy. It's their decision to make. So next time you give money to a homeless person or a drug addict, just think about that. Just think about how much, suffering and pain they've caused to other people, innocent people, who just shouldn't have been involved in it. I probably wouldn't be as against drugs as I am if it wasn't for seeing that and being involved in it and trying them, and it just, I think you just learn, you're like, oh, this isn't worth it. It's not worth it. I used to steal a lot of his marijuana and stuff like that, and I was always like, and oddly, it always was different. I always wondered if it was like laced with stuff, because it would always mess me up way more than any other kind of street marijuana that I would get. The stuff that I stole from my dad's stash was always like nuts, just crazy nuts. Like it didn't matter how much I did, like it was just, I would steal it from him when I was like super young, probably like from 5th grade to 7th or 8th grade. I would just steal his drugs and do them. And I was like, yeah, I need to stop this. After a point, you just become so like numb to like like you're just like, nothing is fun anymore, like nothing is enjoyable. It's just an escape from whatever else you don't want to experience. Like you're just running from whatever feelings you don't want to have. You're trying to live in some fantasy land that isn't real versus just like facing your problems head on. It's cowardice in a weird way. Like, and that's what I've learned, like doing his drugs, like thinking like, oh, like, and it was weird because like I would steal his drugs and do them thinking like that I didn't want to be like him, and that I was just doing the same stupid shit that he would probably do if he was me. And it just became a point where you're just like, dude, I feel myself getting dumber doing these drugs. I feel myself getting sadder, more miserable doing these drugs. And I was like, well, I don't. And maybe it was helpful to have the scenario of seeing what it could be like versus what it is right now. Like I had a roadmap to see where it could possibly end up, and most people don't have that roadmap to be like, oh, I could end up being a degenerate piece of garbage who wrecks everyone's lives around you. And I was like, well, do I want to do that? Yeah, no, I don't. I don't want to do that. And and I'm not. I don't. I really don't think it should be illegal. I'm not one of those people either. Like, if you want to do marijuana, whatever. If you want to do heroin or meth or whatever it is that your drug of choice, I'm not going to stop you. Like, it's your individual choice. But I do think that people should be aware of how messed up things can get if you just don't, if you don't check yourself. Because it can go downhill way quicker than you could possibly suspect. But yeah, back to when I was like getting followed and stuff like that, being paranoid while I was in college and high school. Yeah, it turns out that it was like a crazy investigation where somebody else ratted on him. One of his friends, again, ratted on him and got him in trouble for meth, dealing meth, basically. So he was trying to sell meth. And yeah, that didn't go well. I remember the scenario that would happen was, so the person that was trying to frame him, basically, I'll say frame him. I do think that he was dealing meth, doing meth, just because of other things that was happening. But one of the things that his friend apparently took his guns, which he wasn't legally supposed to have any guns in the first place, because once you become a felon, like once you get imprisonment or jailed or anything like that, you legally are not supposed to have or own any guns, right? But he hid his firearms and things like that at like friends' houses, of so-called friends' houses, and then this one meth head went and stole his guns and was like, "Hey, I'll give you your guns back if you get me some meth," right? That's the story that I was told, or he told me. So I don't know how truthful it is. I don't know how honest it is. I don't think that it's the full story. So he went to go give him meth, I guess, quote unquote meth, and that right there was a sting operation. So he was trying to get him to deal him meth, so that he could get a lesser statement on his imprisonment, on his friend's imprisonment. So he ended up throwing my dad under the bus, just like the first time by some other guy threw him under the bus to get a lower imprisonment, less time in prison, and that's exactly what happened to him. And then that same cycle happened again, where it's kind of it's funny because it's like you would think you'd go to prison for a really long time. I think it was like 20 years. I looked up, you go to prison for like dealing meth or something in the state that I live in, and I remember him getting out way earlier than he should have, and I was like, oh, he definitely basically did the same thing that he got set up doing. Somebody set him up, and he probably set up other people to bring his time down. I think I'm almost certain that's what happened, because you don't just, your time doesn't go up from a maximum amount of time to 7 months like that. That just doesn't happen like that. Like, so he probably ratted on a few people, got his time down to almost nothing, and got out again. And at that time, I was old enough to kind of like distance myself from it, so I was pretty happy. I remember him trying to come back into my life and everything. And at that point, I was just like so sick of it, and old enough to be able to say and do things about it, to the point where it was like, yeah, you're not coming into my house anymore. You're not, I was just like, get the F out of here. Like, basically just trying to politely tell him to get out of my life. It wasn't polite in any way, shape or form, but like, I was the only one left at the house with my mother. So my brothers were off at college or living in their own house and all this and that. So I had to deal with the bulk of like the BS of him trying to weasel his way into, and it's like weird because I had to like protect my naive mother from it, I think, because she was so willing to give him a million chances beforehand to do it again, and I had to be like, you're not doing that. Which I was selfishly doing it because I just didn't want to live with him. I didn't want that anymore. Like, I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to deal with him. I just didn't want to deal with his friends and stuff like that. And the reason you're probably like, yeah, why are you so against like him being around you and stuff like that? It's because like everything he did was just a pain in the ass. He was always bringing just like criminals around, like constantly. I remember like I decided, and I wonder how often this would happen or whatever. I remember I decided I was going to skip school, like play hooky. I didn't want to go to school, so I was playing hooky this particular day. And two people in camo just started rolling up to my house because I live kind of like in the woods, like a cabin-ish vibe. Two people were like sneaking on to my childhood home, and I was like, what in the like hell are these two people doing? It was like kind of snowy, so there was snow on the ground, and this one was like army crawling up onto my property, like thinking maybe like I didn't see, but I remember just like staring out the window and being like, what the F are these people doing? Was not, not hunting season, no one had guns, not that I could see, but I remember being like, yeah, this is not good. Like, I remember seeing them like sneak out behind one of my sheds, so they were probably going to steal something, which I knew they were. And I remember grabbing my brother's shotgun that was still at the house. So I remember grabbing the shotgun and then calling the police. But my dog barked at them, so it kind of spooked them, scared them, so they like ran off before I could, pop them or get close enough to, or let them think they were in the clear or something while the police were on their way. But my dog barked, that piece of garbage. No, he's alright. He's a good dog, but I wish he didn't bark because it would have been great to see these people go to prison. And I knew who these guys were. I could tell by like their shape that they were like his so-called friends that he had and things like that, who have been up to the house and are aware of the things that we have and had. So I think they went up to try to steal a snowmobile, which they weren't successful in, but I think they took some parts off of it, so maybe that was their goal to begin with, to take some parts off a snowmobile. But it's like super stupid. Like, one of the only parts that they got was like a belt or something, and it was like maybe like $30 belt, like a $20 belt to put on a snowmobile. And it's like, how are you like down? How are you down so bad to be like risking, I don't know, just death, I guess? Because imagine if I just pulled that shotgun trigger. Like, imagine if he'd be dead. Like, imagine if he tried something stupid. Like, you're risking your life, your freedom for $20, like a $20 part to a snowmobile. Like that's what you want your drug addicts are so weird because they have no risk assessment. They don't like. I have to just believe that they know better. Look, I can't pretend like they don't know better. It's moronic that they're like, oh, let me risk everything for like one more hit or $20. It's like, dude, like, how easy is it to just get a job if you want $20 that bad, if you want to get high that bad? It's just the fact that they didn't want to work, and they just want to get high. It's just so weird that the choices that are made by drug addicts. It's so weird. But yeah, that was one thing. And I remember being like, I knew the people that were robbing me. I remember telling my dad who they were. I was like, yo, it's so-and-so. And, he like cut ties with these people for a certain amount of time, And then after he got arrested for the third or fourth time, I can't even remember, he went to jail. And this part makes me the most mad because like it affected me, when people were trying to rob the house when I was home or shit like that. And when I had the same people that tried to steal, and it's so weird how the legal system works, because the same people that tried to steal the snowmobile and steal parts off the snowmobile came up and stole my motorcycle. Just stole my motorcycle one day. And I even I remember telling the cops, I remember trespassing onto these people's property, finding my motorcycle, then calling the cops on these people that stole my motorcycle, and the cops not doing a damn thing. Like a thing, like, right? And so there's an investigation going on to these people. It's like, dude, it's so weird that like the people who are innocent, and I'm calling myself innocent because it's like I have nothing to do with this BS drama between drug dealers and drug addicts, but I'm getting affected by it because they're stealing my things, they're stealing my family's things, and it's just because they're associated with my father. It's the only reason. It's like, and I just think it's funny because like you call the police and you tell the police, you literally just, I did the investigation for the people. I found my motorcycle on their property, told them that my motorcycle's there. The cop came there, took the motorcycle, and then nobody got arrested. And I was like, what? Like, what? Like, the legal system is so screwed up. It's so beyond me, like, and it's so beyond fixing at this point, I think. Like, that like, drug addicts and just criminals can do things to innocent people and then just get away with it. Like, the only people suffering are the innocent people because they just get off scot-free. And this so-called investigation going on, like, it took months for them to just, they didn't even press charges. I tried to press charges on this person, right, to be like, yo, they stole my bike, you know, you could prove it, here's the serial numbers, here's what happened, you know, like, they just took my bike. They just came out, stole my bike. And I remember reading an article like months later after this has happened. Like nobody got arrested or anything. This guy was driving his motorcycle. The irony here, right? Driving his motorcycle, and a deer came out in the middle of the road when he was high on meth and had drugs in his backpack and got launched from his motorcycle. The deer just ran out. It was like 4 a.m. doing nothing good probably at that time of day. And I wonder because he was driving on a road. The road that it happened on was a road going to my house, and I knew where this person lived too. It was far from that road. So me thinking like, what is that person doing driving on that road? I wonder, like I wonder to this day if he was driving to come steal something from my house, and he died. Pronounced dead at the scene, high on meth and had meth in his backpack. It's just crazy. I guess that's just nuts how that happened. But after that, I ended up getting my motorcycle back, absolutely destroyed, mangled, and beaten because they closed the case because the person was dead. But it was like, all right, there was no investigation going on in the first place. Like we know, like you're not fooling me, police officers. But yeah, just because that person was associated with my father, just like being around, like just criminals would just come steal shit and try to steal shit, and it was just so much nonsense, just associated and tied to my father, which I had no control over. And yeah, it's also one thing too, like once he being like in and out of courthouses and things like that. At such a young age, like I was super young, filing for a PFA against my father, and easily got it because he was in the midst of another investigation for drugs and but yeah, I don't know. It's just I don't think most people experience it exactly the same way that I did. Some probably definitely experience it way worse. Like, I was lucky to be aware of, like, what was going on. I had a decent mother, not perfect, but nobody is, and she did her absolute best with the cards that she was dealt. And I am grateful for being around or raised by a meth head, because there's a certain amount of like, I won't say intelligence, but like life experience that you get just being around that kind of chaos, and to be able to see and judge people, I think, the correct way before you even meet them. It's pretty easy. Like, I'm glad that I have that skill. I'll call it a skill, just to be aware of like what kind of a person is. Like, I just see people that remind me of him, and I'm just like, I want nothing to do with this person. I don't want to be around this person. I don't want to see this person. I know that they're lying. I can see straight through their teeth. And it's kind of I'm happy to get away from that environment, like away from just all the chaos and all the drama of it. But for any person, I guess, experiencing it or going through it now, just know, like, at a certain point, at a certain age, you're going to get old enough to be able to look back, be grateful for it, but also to escape it, to make the choice whether or not to be in it or be out of it. And you should always make the choice to be out of it, because life is so much better not around drug addicts. Just so much better, so much happier, like, without it. Yeah.